This is Freethought Matters, and I'm Laurie Gaylor. Welcome to our kickoff show of the fall season.
And I'm Dan Barker. Our special guest today is U.S. Representative Jared Huffman, who's going to tell you why you should be scared, very scared, of Project 2025.
The Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces Freethought Matters, is the nation's largest association of free thinkers. That's atheists, agnostics, and other non-believers. We invite you to join us in our vital work to keep our secular government free from religious influence. Become a member at ffrf.org or ask for a complimentary copy of our newspaper, Freethought Today. Freedom depends on freethinkers. Watch prior episodes of Freethought Matters on FFRF's YouTube channel.
Our task force is going to spotlight this extreme agenda so that everyone has a very clear-eyed understanding of what it is, why it should be taken seriously, and also to prepare Congress, again, for that unthinkable event. I don't think it's going to happen, but if it does, if we're facing this agenda in a second Trump presidency, we need to be ready.
That was our guest today, U.S. Representative Jared Huffman, announcing the formation of a task force designed to stop Project 2025, an undemocratic playbook conjured up by extremist groups. Congressman Huffman represents California's 2nd Congressional District and is co-chair of the Congressional Freethought Caucus, which has 24 congressional members. And of special interest to us and to our viewers is the fact that Representative Huffman, a humanist and agnostic, is the only openly non-religious member of Congress.
And we have to put a disclaimer up front. We can't talk about Project 2025 without acknowledging the fact that it's intended to be implemented by the next Republican president. However, please note that the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which produces this show, is a nonpartisan nonprofit that takes no position on candidates. And with that long introduction, thank you so much, Representative Huffman, for your leadership, and welcome back to Freethought Matters.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to see you again. So before we talk in depth about the issue, we'd like to quote from your announcement about forming the task force. You wrote, "Project 2025 is a dystopian plot that's already in motion to dismantle our democratic institutions, abolish checks and balances, chip away at church-state separation, and impose a far-right agenda that infringes on basic liberties and violates public will. This is an unprecedented embrace of extremism, fascism, and religious nationalism, orchestrated by the radical right and its dark money backers. We need a coordinated strategy to save America and stop this coup before it's too late."
So very eloquent statement there, Representative Huffman. Before we get to the nuts and bolts of the Stop Project 2025 task force, Representative Huffman, we'd like to hear your reaction to what some celebrities are saying about Project 2025, such as John Oliver and actress Taraji P. Henson.
The main insight we have into all of this comes from something called Project 2025, which I know sounds like a sexy CW sci-fi drama starring Ashanti, Chad Michael Murray and Turtle from Entourage, but incredibly, it's even worse than that. Basically, Project 2025 aims to do for Trump's whole presidency what the Federalist Society did for his judicial picks, give him a step-by-step game plan that he simply has to execute and then take credit for.
The Project 2025 plan is not a game. Look it up. Look up 2025 agenda, because next year this time could look very different if you don't vote.
So, Representative Huffman, are they right? Is Project 2025 2025 really a threat to democracy?
Yeah, Dan, it really is. And, it's true that it's 920 pages of crazy, but it's deadly serious at the same time. And that's why we are spending a lot of time right now breaking it down. We're having deep dive subject matter briefings for members of Congress and staff because we need to make sure that Americans know what is in this thing so that they can decide for themselves whether they want to be part of a dystopic right-wing future that ends our democracy or they want to maybe join us in trying to stop it while we still can.
So who is behind Project 2025 and what do they plan to accomplish?
So nominally, this is a document that comes out of the Heritage Foundation, which, as you probably know, is a leading right-wing. They call themselves a think tank. I think they're a political operation. And they have been offering up suggested policy frameworks for Republican presidents going all the way back to Ronald Reagan. They call their periodic offerings a mandate for leadership. And Republican presidents have pretty dutifully followed them. This year, it's a little bit different. They got to work on this mandate for leadership that we call Project 2025. 2 years ago, they brought in all of these senior operatives from the first Trump administration and people from the inner MAGA circle. In fact, more than 80% of the authors, editors, and managers of Project 2025 came out of Trump's first administration, senior positions in that. And they rolled out this document with 110 other right-wing groups, and this includes some hate groups, some actual identified hate groups. And for the past year, they have been swaggering and boasting about how this is the Trump war plan. That's their words, the war plan that a second Trump administration will use to fix all the unfinished business from the first time around, and frankly, to do a lot more. This thing is even more extreme than the worst measures that we saw in the first Trump administration, but it's also a lot smarter than what we saw in the first Trump administration. Very strategic, very specific, and that's why it needs to be taken so seriously.
So to look at some of the ideas behind it, one of them is to kind of make the White House take over federal agencies. They wouldn't have independence, correct?
There are a number of federal agencies that, for really important policy reasons, do have some separation from the White House. In some cases, that separation came because there were scandals and abuses of power at various times in American history. For example, the FBI. There were specific reforms put in place to make sure that the director of the FBI has a 10-year tenure so that they don't become just political operatives, partisan operatives of each president who happens to be in office. And there are any number of other examples where federal agencies, either by practice or by actual institutionalized safeguards, are insulated from politics. One of the big parts of Project 2025 is to change all of that, to bring every single federal agency right under direct personal control of the President of the United States.
So in other words, you have political appointees instead of civil service, is that right?
Well, that's right, and we can talk a little bit about that so-called civil service reform. It's a big part of how they are attempting to take over the government and move their agenda forward. But let's take the Department of Justice, for example, another one of those agencies where, for really important reasons, there has been arm's length between a president and an attorney general, where presidents don't tell them which people to prosecute and which investigations to undertake. That is going to change under Project 2025. The Department of Justice would basically become the Department of Political Retribution and Trump's personal lawyers.
And what about the Department of Education? Do they want to just get rid of it?
Yeah, just get rid of it. You know, they don't like public education. They certainly don't like secular public education. And so they propose to get rid of the Department of Education and to redirect public school funding at the federal level in a way that, achieves their longtime dream to directly federally fund parochial church schools.
Well, they're already starting that with vouchers and other public money going to private schools, but that's scary to do away with the entire department.
It's reckless, but they hate the Department of Education. They hate public education. They hate Title IX and Title VI and all of these other equity and fairness and civil rights rules that we require of folks that receive federal money in both primary and secondary education.
And I think a lot of women would be concerned about the Mifepristone issue, because it kind of looked like we dodged that bullet with the Supreme Court ruling earlier this summer. But what would Project 2025 mean for medication abortion?
Well, for all abortions, really. Donald Trump says that he won't sign a national abortion bill. He won't need to, because Project 2025 effectuates a national abortion ban without Congress needing to put a bill on the president's desk. And it does it in a couple of ways. One, I talked about bringing these semi-autonomous agencies under direct personal presidential control. One of those is the FDA. The reason that mifepristone is used in 60% of abortions these days is because the FDA approved it as a safe and effective medication for that purpose. And all the president would need to do if Project 2025 is implemented is appoint someone who was willing to do his political bidding and undo that drug approval. Now, they have another way in which they would effectuate a nationwide abortion ban, and that's dusting off these old morality codes from the 1870s, the Comstock Act, which includes a prohibition on anything that terminates a pregnancy. It nominally is anything that is using the U.S. mail, because there's got to be a federal point of jurisdiction and authority for these laws, but it's been interpreted to include more than just the Postal Service, any type of delivery service. And it's so broadly written that if any equipment that any facility uses to conduct abortions comes through FedEx, Amazon, UPS, the United States Postal Service, even the sanitation supplies, even indirect supplies that are used in a clinic that provides these procedures, that would be criminalized under the Comstock Act, which they intend to, dust off. These are old, antiquated laws that haven't been used in a long time, but they in turn intend to enforce them very aggressively. And that's the other way in which you're going to get a nationwide abortion ban, even in states that believe they have protected themselves against this.
You also said that they want to do away with democracy. How would that happen?
In several ways. They go right after civil rights laws and voting rights. They do that by the way they're proposing to restructure the Department of Justice, among many other things. But they also call for this incredible expansion of presidential power and the use of emergency authorities to do things like declare martial law. It's really not hard to imagine, especially now that a second Trump presidency would be cloaked with this absolute immunity. So yes. Donald Trump would have everything he needs to, let's say, suspend an election or to overturn the results of an election that he didn't like, and we would have no recourse against him whatsoever, because that would be within the ambit of his official duties. Certainly, good enough, at least, for this Supreme Court to let him get away with it.
So we have another clip we'd like to play, Representative Huffman, of that notorious comment last summer by the Heritage Foundation director, Kevin Roberts.
The reason that so many anchors on MSNBC, for example, are losing their minds daily is because our side is winning. And so I come full circle in this response and just want to encourage you with some substance that we are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
So your thoughts on that?
Well, there they go again, right? All of these veiled threats of violence, and that is something that also occurs throughout the Project 2025 manifesto. These folks are at the point where it is any means necessary, up to and including violence, to achieve their goals. It is about power, and it is about doing whatever it takes to get what they want. And when they make veiled threats like that on national television, it should give everyone a chilling reaction.
Yeah, they think they're at war, don't they? We have to take a break, and when we come back, Representative Huffman, we want to talk about some of the other efforts that the Congressional Freethought Caucus is doing to fight Christian nationalism.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist.
When I first recorded that commercial back in 2014, being openly atheist in America was still fairly uncommon. Today, the fastest growing religious group in the country is the non-religious, especially among the young. That progress is heartening, but the religious pushback is fierce and the forces of Christian nationalism are well organized. Our progress won't continue unless we work together so that reason and our secular constitution will prevail. That's why I'm asking you to join the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics working to keep state and church separate, just like our founders intended. Please join the Freedom from Religion Foundation today. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I'm Patrick, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. 9 years ago, I saw Dan Barker debate Christian apologists at the University of Wisconsin. They were discussing the resurrection of Jesus and whether or not it was true. At the time, I was Catholic and was very convinced Dan was wrong and that, in fact, the story was true. That debate prompted me to take a course on early Christian literature, and I, in fact, learned more and questioned my own beliefs. The more I read and the more I learned, the more I came to realize that I was being pretty much intellectually dishonest. Fast forward to 9 years later, I'm now an employee at FFRF and work for the vital mission of separation of state and church. I'm proud to be an out-of-the-closet atheist.
On Inauguration Day,
the 4 years ahead
seems like an eternity.
It's not.
Because the left has engineered our government and institutions
to reject conservative ideology. The 2025 Presidential Transition Project
brings together over 60 conservative organizations
to ensure the policy and personnel are in place.
On January 20th, 2025.
Using 4 pillars,
we are laying the foundation
for the next president
to end Washington's bureaucracy and restore American prosperity.
Well, there you go. Welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with longtime friend of Freethought Matters, Representative Jared Huffman, about his Project 2025 Task Force. Stop Project 2025 Task Force. We just played an intentionally vague propaganda video that the Heritage Foundation has made about Project 2025. And Representative Huffman, what's wrong with that depiction they just gave?
Well, it's happy talk, and there's nothing happy about Project 2025. This is dark dystopia. This is a blueprint, essentially, for Donald Trump, especially now that he's cloaked with absolute immunity from the Supreme Court supermajority that he created, to go from being an aspiring dictator to a real one. And that's no exaggeration. That's what this really is. So the video that they don't want you to see is all the videos where they're out there bragging about how completely intertwined this effort is with Donald Trump and with his campaign and with the folks that are going to populate a second Trump presidency. Lately, they've begun to figure out just how unpopular Project 2025 is. And so they're starting to run from that entanglement with Trump and the Trump campaign. Donald Trump's trying to disown this thing. But you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, they've literally spent the last year making sure the whole world knows how closely they're working together.
And those are all kind of his people, aren't they?
They're all his people. Many of the pieces of Project 2025 are ideas that came out of his first administration that he out there on the campaign trail and in other appearances has made clear that he wants to do if he gets back into the White House. You've also got the Trump Super PAC promoting Project 2025. They've even got a special website, TrumpProject2025.com. So if you go to Milwaukee this next week, which is where the Republican National Convention is being held, the first thing you see when you land at the airport is a welcome banner from the Heritage Foundation, who is sponsoring the Republican National Convention. So, you know, for them to say that we're just a think tank, we're not a Republican political operation, you wouldn't know that if you were flying into Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the next week. And then on the first day of the Republican convention, Heritage is doing a little policy wonk teach-in for delegates about Project 2025. So it's not very credible, but certainly you can understand why Donald Trump is trying to run very fast away from all of this.
So given the broad nature of Project 2025, does the task force have legislative or policy priorities, and do we need an immediate response and long-term strategies to prevent a dictatorship?
Well, that's an important question. There certainly is some legislation that has been introduced by Democrats in this Congress that would help to provide some bulwarks against some of these things. But we're in the minority right now, and it's not very likely that we're going to be able to legislate our way to full protection. The White House has worked on some executive orders and things that they can do administratively, for example, to try to slow down, really, things like the civil service reform, which is really just a takeover of the United States government and a repopulating it with political loyalists. But, you know, executive orders are only as good as the executive, and there will be day one executive orders under a second Trump presidency that undo anything that President Biden can do and that set a new course. So the tools that we have to work with right now kind of start with just public opinion, maybe the strongest tool we have, making sure everybody knows what's in this darn thing so that they can make an informed decision come November in the election. But we're also working, you know, to think about what we would do in the unthinkable event that Trump does win the election. We're working with groups who are lawyered up and developing contingency plans. I'd sure rather not get to that point, but, you know, we'll be ready either way.
So you're saying you don't believe Trump when he's trying to distance himself from this agenda?
Oh, it's laughable, and you probably saw the internal inconsistency in his own tweet. Trump's not a very good liar, which is surprising for someone that lies as prolifically as he does. But to say in the first breath, I know nothing about Project 2025 and don't even know who's behind it, and then have in the very next sentence an acknowledgement that he disagrees with parts of it. I mean, come on, give me a break. And we've got him on tape talking about, you know, what a great advisory role that the Heritage Foundation plays and that their work on Project 2025 is going to play. I mean, it's just a mountain of evidence that can't be wiped away in a tweet like that.
Yeah. So we've seen a growth in at least the acknowledgement of Christian nationalism in the country. And in fact, I think you were the first person to use that phrase, Christian nationalism, on the floor of the House. Do you think Project 2025 is like an outgrowth of how emboldened these Christian nationalists are becoming?
There is certainly an overlap in the Venn diagram here. Christian nationalists are well represented in Project 2025. I think Project 2025 also includes some other elements that are probably distinct from the Christian nationalist movement, but it certainly rolls up the worst of their bad ideas and would implement them through some measures that are so draconian they would like be unthinkable at any other time in American history. I mean, the use of the military, the use of all of these extreme emergency powers, the dusting off of these old morality codes from the Comstock Act, and, you know, daring Congress and others to challenge the president in court as he tries to implement these authorities, completely going around Congress through what they call impoundment. And, you know, back in the 1970s when Richard Nixon tried to do that, Congress passed an impoundment act to try to prevent presidents from simply ignoring Congress's power of the purse and redirecting funds that are appropriated by Congress. Well, a second Trump presidency would ignore the Impoundment Act and just proceed to do whatever they want with the federal budget, and then challenge people to sue them in court. They think any attempt to control them under the Impoundment Act is going to be held unconstitutional by this Supreme Court. So they are really throwing down the gauntlet here on anything that could limit or constrain presidential power.
So I hate to say, talk about worst case scenario, but if Project 2025 is set in motion, what hope would we have to restore democracy?
the best hope is to stop it before it is ever set in motion. We have a chance to do that in November. So let me just emphasize that in a big way. That's why so many people are talking about Project 2025 right now. We're figuring out that this is our best and maybe last chance to stop it. But there's no scenario where we just roll over, obviously, and let them do this to our democracy and our fundamental rights and everything else. So, you're left with states' attorney general bringing lawsuits, state laws trying to, kind of backfill and backstop some of these rights. A lot of legal challenges, hopefully clever legal challenges that will have a chance in a judiciary that's unfortunately very well represented by Trump appointees. But at the end of the day, we're not sure whether any of that will be successful. We're not sure that whether some of the guardrails that contained Trump's worst impulses in his first presidency will even be there in his second presidency. You're not going to have a Mark Milley or a Dan Esper or a Mike Pence, people who would actually take their oath of office seriously. You're going to have a bunch of MAGA lackeys who will do whatever Donald Trump says. And remember, Donald Trump has nothing to lose because he has absolute immunity if he's our next president. So he's going to tell them to do all kinds of things that would just be unthinkable at any previous time in our history.
Well, we want to once again say that FFRF is nonpartisan, and these are your views, Representative Huffman, but we are very concerned about all the issues in Project 2025 that impact the separation of church and state and democracy. So thank you so much for sounding the alarm, for your leadership on the Congressional Freethought Caucus and on the Stop Project 2025 Task Force.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.